During the early 2000s, my husband and I were enjoying the American dream in Texas. He was a teacher and a coach, and I was the Jill of all trades. I was an elementary school tutor, cosmetologist, hairdresser, newspaper editor, and an advertiser. We were fortunate to live in the wonderful community of Lockhart, the barbecue capital of Texas, where my husband had a 16-year coaching job. After several years, we purchased our first home there, and oddly enough, we had passed this house for years, never noticing until the for sale sign went up in the front yard. It spoke to me. It was Tudor style, a huge wooden oval door, plant boxes, a clay tile roof, and a full-size basement. In the South, that is unheard of. Well, being a hairdresser, you have connections because when you cover a lady's gray, she is forever in your debt. I called up a favor, and my realtor friend got me into the house for an unofficial peek. The house was sad and neglected. The walls were painted sherbet green, and the heavy, dust-covered slated blinds kept it dark like a cave, dimming the already stained stucco walls. There was standing water in the basement, and some of the ceiling tiles were falling in, but there were hardwood floors and ornate light fixtures with sconces on the walls. When I walked into the kitchen, I knew it was mine. Red countertops and tattered rooster curtains. I collected roosters at the time, so for me it was a sign. And even in such a sad state, it was clear that the house had once been cherished, and something in me wanted to pour my whole heart into fixing it back up. So that's what we did. But when we moved forward with the loan process, we hit a snag. It seemed the house needed extensive repairs and upgrades that we hadn't anticipated. We were crushed. And then after a wonderful turn of events, the seller instructed the realtor to take the cost of the repairs off the price. The realtor told us that in all her years, she had never seen that happen. The house had belonged to the seller's sister, Miss Sunshine, and her husband. They were the Craigs, and they had no heirs. The seller was in a rest home and took comfort in knowing that a young family would be moving in. Well, we had a 3-year-old son at the time, and when the repairs were finished, we had a beautifully renovated 1920s Art Deco gym, and I loved that house. One day I was in the basement doing laundry when I heard the door to the stairs open. I expected my husband to call out because he came home sometimes during the day if he got a break. When he didn't greet me as usual, I turned and looked toward the sound of the footsteps coming down the stairs, but it wasn't my husband that I saw. It was a ghostly man wearing shined black leather shoes and dress slacks. I gasped and I squeezed my eyes shut, hollering and falling backward at the same time. And when I stood up again and composed myself, there was no one there. "We love this house, and we will be very good to it," I said to the staircase in my empty basement. "You can stay, but please don't ever show yourself to me or I'll get scared and move out and this place will become a rental." After that, I never had another problem. A year or so later, our daughter was born and life rolled on. Football season came and went. We had killer parties at the house. Kids were everywhere and men yelling at the game downstairs and the wives having good gossip sessions upstairs, and we were very happy. One night when my daughter was about 4, she fell asleep after dinner at the bottom of our bed. I didn't want to wake her up and then be awake for the rest of the night, so we decided to let her stay there. Then in the middle of the night, she started shaking my leg. "Mommy, Mommy, wake up!" I heard her whispering. I thought she was just wanting to get me up, and after several tries, she stopped. And the next morning, I asked her why she had tried to wake me. "I was trying to tell you that those people were coming in the room," she said in a matter-of-fact tone. "What people?" I asked her, trying to look indifferent while my mind started racing. "Well, it was a man and a woman," she said. "They came from the kitchen, up the hall to your room." "Well, what did they look like?" I asked her, and she thought about it for a while. "The man had a hat that went down over his eyes, and the lady's hair was in rolls and all over her face," she said. Well, I pictured Mr. Craig in a fedora and Miss Sunshine with that classic Great Gatsby-style hair, which would have best described the era in which the house was built. Well, what did they want? I stammered, daring to ask. They wanted to play with your feet, my daughter said nonchalantly, but I told them to go away. That's what I always tell them. I was floored. And after that, I was so afraid that I couldn't even go to the bathroom at night or to the basement after dark, which was ridiculous because nothing ever happened. There were several times my son had tried to tell me that his Beanie Babies played together. I felt guilty because I didn't listen. I should have asked him what he meant, but I knew he wouldn't be able to handle the answer. The beauty shop sure got a kick out of my story, though. A few weeks later, my friend called after touring an old home in Fredericksburg. The tour guide explained that they had an entity that liked to play with the guests' feet. She called me and we both screamed like girls. Well, we lived in that house for a few more years until coaching took us to the coast. And when it was time to go, I mourned the house, literally. I made everyone go to the car and I bawled on the floor. It was a hot July in Texas and a fluke of rain poured on us when we left town. I took all the fixtures from the house, which I carried guilt about, but this past summer we visited our old town, and after 20 years we saw the house again, and it broke my heart. The fence we built had fallen down and all my flower beds were gone. I was glad I saved the fixtures for Miss Sunshine and for me. Though it was hard for me to see the house in such a dilapidated state again, I took some comfort in knowing that Miss Sunshine and her husband had gotten their home back. Hopefully they still saw the house in its full glory, just as my daughter had seen them. I love your stories, and as a proud coach's wife, I'd love to meet your wife. Well, you're welcome to meet my wife. I'm not a coach, but I did play the game. I love the game. I know a lot of coaches, but anyway, this was a wonderful story. This isn't one of those stories that just makes your ears bleed that it's so scary, but it's just a good, well put together story, and she claims it's true, and I have no doubt that this woman and her family went through this, and I'd be curious to what her husband said about all this. I wonder if he experienced anything, I guess is what I'm saying. So I've had this for a while. I'm glad I got to it. I appreciate the woman sending it to me. It's a wonderful story. Thank you. Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is Cam Buckner. I appreciate you clicking on the video. Did you guys have a good Labor Day? Let me know in the comments section. We had a great weekend, and we're having a great week. My old lady, she's been behaving well. She's been doing a lot of work around the place, and I took her as a treat to the ever-delicious Taco Bell today. We've changed our diet recently, and we're feeling great. We're losing weight. Everything's going great, and we decided to just be bad and cheap today. I got the $7 Cravings box, which includes a seasoned beef chalupa supreme, a double-stack taco, beefy 5-layer burrito, chips and nacho cheese, and a medium drink, all for the low price of $7. She's been doing a lot of work around here. She got all the garden pulled up. We left a few tomato plants. She's dug a ditch between the double wide and the septic tank. She power washed off the back porch. She's got a bunch of vegetables canned. She did that all in about 3 days, so my old lady's doing good, so I rewarded her with a Taco Bell, the ever-delicious Taco Bell. All right, enough of that. Thanks for joining me on this podcast. Let's get into some more stories. Think you're going to like this. All right, here we go. Okay, here's a story from my friend Cat Rabbit. I've had this a while. Just now getting to it, but it's a good story. It's about an Alabama white thing, Bigfoot. It's really good. In 1973, when I was 13 years old, my sister lived in a small 2-bedroom trailer behind my parents' house. She worked the evening shift at Olympia Mills, and her husband worked out of town. She had a 1-year-old son that my mother would keep in the afternoon, but at night I put him to bed and stayed with him until she got home. I had suffered from insomnia at that age, so I didn't mind staying up late. I loved going to her trailer each night, and when I was there, I felt like I was all grown up, like I was my own boss. She had a new Donny Osmond album, Alone Together, and like all little girls at that age, he was my idol. I would listen to his album all night until she came in, and then I'd head to my house and jump in bed. My house was a good walking distance away, about half a football field, but my sister kept her porch lights on, and my parents kept theirs on for me. It was no biggie for me, and walking alone at night never bothered me. But one night I was doing my thing, and I was eating junk food and listening to Donnie and checking on the baby, when all of a sudden I got so tired that I could hardly hold my eyes open. I normally didn't get sleepy after midnight, so the sensation was strange to me, to say the least. And try as I might, I couldn't fight it. I was so overcome by exhaustion that I lay down on my sister's bed at the end of the trailer, and I instantly went into a trance-like state. I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't fully awake either. As I lay there in this sudden confusing fog of tiredness, I saw what I can only describe as the abominable snowman through the open window at the end of the bed. Now, Alabama is known for its white thing, not thing, but white Thang, Thang. It's our version of Bigfoot. But there I was, paralyzed in my sister's bed as this creature that looked like the abominable snowman from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer's film stared at me through the open window. But unlike a children's movie, I wasn't so sure there would be a happy ending, and there was no turning this white thing off. The creature had shaggy white hair that waved around as he moved and fell around his face. He was dark around the eyes, and his mouth was curled into a distorted smile, exposing his sharp teeth. He slowly reached his arm through the window at me, but I was powerless to do anything about it, to just lay there and let it happen. Even if the paralyzing fatigue hadn't overcome me, I'm sure by that point I would have been paralyzed by fear. I couldn't scream or run or anything. His long white hair dragged across the bed as he reached his arm toward me, and without touching me, he hovered his monstrous hand over my stomach. Donnie singing in the background twisted into a faded jumble of sounds, and then everything went dark. It couldn't have been but just a few minutes, and I came to again to the sounds of a record player skipping. I didn't wake with a jerk like you do from having a nightmare. Instead, I felt rested and calm. I checked on the baby, and I spent the next 30 minutes trying to figure out what the hell had just happened to me. When my sister came home, I didn't dare tell her about what happened. It would have frightened her, and she would be moving back in with Mama and Daddy. And when she got settled, I realized I still had to walk home alone in the dark. The walk was quiet, but I knew something was lingering in the darkness and watching me. I wanted to run, but I didn't let myself because I didn't want to give in to the fear. I wanted to look over my shoulder, but I was too afraid, just in case I saw the white thing again. And if I saw it, that meant that it was real. And if it was real, that meant there was a monster in the woods. But my shaking legs got me home safely, and when I got inside, I locked the door behind me, and I made up my mind that I wasn't going to tell anyone what had happened. I'm the baby of the family, and my older siblings would have ragged me to death. Years later, in 2012, I had a game camera pointed at my chicken house in hopes of capturing whatever or whoever I suspected had been coming into my yard at night. Each day I would check the camera, but I didn't have any luck until my buddies Ashley and Denise came over. We decided to get the SIM card out of my game camera to check it because maybe they would notice something that I had missed. And as soon as I pulled the footage up on my laptop, Denise pointed her finger at the screen and shouted, "What is that?" The three of us huddled our heads closer to the screen to see what she was looking at. And at first, all I could see was my husband's truck going down the driveway, which had set off the camera. But in the background, there was something massive and white standing on two legs. Oh boy, were we excited. And we shouted and hollered for my husband to come and see, and then ran outside and put the SIM card back in the game camera. I got my friend Denise to run out there to try to get a comparison picture, but it was too far for her to set the camera off. I took the picture of her with my phone anyway, excited to get them professionally printed as soon as possible. The next day, I went to the picture developer with the images from my game camera and my phone. The man working there told me that he had to blow up the picture of Denise just to get a glimpse of her white baseball cap, but otherwise she was way too small to see. But in comparison, the picture of the white figure standing exactly where Denise had been was big enough to see even without blowing it up. He slid the picture of the white creature toward me and out of curiosity asked what it was, but I had lost focus on his voice. On the radio behind him, Donny Osmond started singing from the album Alone Together. Without looking at the picture, I put it in the envelope he gave me, and I wished him a nice day. And as I drove back home, the memories of what happened to me when I was 13 all came flooding back. I glanced at the envelope of pictures on the seat next to me, wanting to see the image of the white thing because I knew I hadn't imagined it. But if I saw it, that meant that it was real. And if it was real, that meant there was a monster in my woods. Oh, Cat Rabbit, I remember getting this email, and I remember several months ago thinking, I can't wait to read this to the audience. But I had so many stacked up in front of you. I didn't know this story about you. You and I have communicated a little bit, and I didn't know this story about you. This is really good. This is a really good story. Alabama's white thing. If any of you guys know anything about Alabama, the Alabama white thing, talk about it in the comment section and let others know what it is. And I'll do some digging on it, see if I can find some other stuff about it. I know Cat Rabbit probably has tons of stories from others in her area. She's a Bigfoot group kind of an organizer, investigator. She knows a lot about these creatures. So thanks for the email. Thanks for the story, Cat Rabbit. I really appreciate it. Love you. Thank you. Hope your husband's doing well. My wife and I reconnected at our 30-year class reunion in 2011. She was the homecoming queen and I was the quiet kid in the back of the class. I wasn't social at all, and as you would imagine, she was exactly the opposite. But my career in the Army brought out the man that was hidden within me, and I wasn't shy after that. And we got it together, and the rest is history. And it's kind of funny. You travel throughout the world and have to come back home to find what you've really been looking for. I was working at Fort Bragg at the time. She moved in with her items, and we made it a home. In the spare bedroom, she ushered in her grandmother's dressing table and large chest of drawers. The room had a creepy vibe, and I thought I was the only one who noticed it. I rarely went into that room, and I noticed that the dog didn't go in there either. I mentioned that I didn't like the room, and I explained to my wife why. And she told me that after we had set up the house, she decided to go in there and sleep while I was away on a work-related trip. She wanted to see how quiet it was during the night, and she told me that in the middle of the night she heard what she described as an electrical snapping or popping sound. And when she opened her eyes, she saw a ball of hazy light off the foot of the bed. She looked at it for a few seconds and then it faded away. She admitted that she didn't want to scare me over this. She had heard my ghost stories from when I was in Germany and knew I had issues with the topic, but overall she didn't have a bad feeling about it. It was just something that happened without explanation. Sometime after this, I was awakened in the night by the same loud popping noise that lasted for a few seconds. I told my wife about it, and we'd agreed that maybe it was just someone checking on us. My wife's dad was having repeated cancer issues at the time, and her mother was having problems coming to grips with his death spiral. They lived in a small town just north of the New Orleans area, so I found myself a job out there, and we began the long process of getting the two commands to allow me to move. And during these 4 months of moving prep, my father-in-law died, and after that we ended up buying a house just a few neighborhoods from my wife's mother. We set the house up and again the activity started, and within a month or so we got the house situated to include grandmother's furniture and a spare bedroom. And in addition to the strange things coming from that room, we would also occasionally smell pipe and cigarette smoke wafting through our house. Well, we're non-smokers, so it was pretty distinct and out-of-place smell. I don't sleep with the doors open if I have the choice. Might be a military thing, I'm not sure. I also don't tolerate a door left a few inches open because it creeps me out. Either door should be completely open or completely closed, but not a little one or the other. Within our first few days of living in the new house, we were getting ready for bed when my wife asked me to open the bedroom door just a little. Well, because I love that woman, I reluctantly did it for her, and in the split second that I glanced into the hallway, I saw a white figure floating there. It immediately shot up through the ceiling and set off the smoke alarm. Well, I told my wife about it, and she said it was just my imagination, but I know what I saw. 2 months after moving in, I noticed that our dog would go to the back door every night at the same time and wait. Well, this wasn't unusual if one of us was coming home from work, but even if we were both home, he would still go out there and wait. The first night it happened, I saw the dog at the back door, wagging his tail with his ears pulled back. Obviously, there was someone there that I couldn't see. For 3 nights after that, I'd get my digital camera and sit in the kitchen and watch the dog sit at the back door waiting for someone, and believe it or not, the dog never did that again. So maybe whoever it was realized what I was doing and stopped. One night we had the mother-in-law over for dinner. She had started to tell us about the ghost cat that she had and her husband had observed just before his death. She thought the cat had come to help him cross over. I'm not sure how it happened, but we started talking about dark spirits. My wife and I like to watch some of the paranormal shows whenever we have the time, and the topic just came up. And I told my wife and mother-in-law about a particular episode that I saw where a guy was being pestered by a demon and about his journey in coming to terms in dealing with it. "I don't believe that junk, not at all," my mother-in-law commented. And right then, directly over her head, a loud popping noise went off and lasted a full 5 seconds. The 3 of us exchanged excited looks, and I suggested that we change the subject. To this day, my mother-in-law denies that the incident happened. Go figure that out. There was another time I was in the bathroom doing my business. As older married couples will understand, I had the door open. As I sat there, I heard the latch pull on grandmother's furniture. I could distinctly hear it dropping against the metal backplate in a quick, rapid manner for about 15 seconds. I finished up and I asked my wife if she had heard it, and of course she had not. I took her into the room and recreated the sound, and I told her to listen for it in case she heard it for herself one day. A few months later, she called me at work and we played Guess What, and she said that she had just heard that noise. Months later, at about 9 in the evening, my wife was going to bed. I had just emptied the dryer and I was folding clothes, standing in front of the TV. And directly behind my head again, I heard the snapping noise. You better believe that I dropped those clothes and I moved quickly to the bedroom. My wife told me that I was as white as a sheet, and she asked if I was all right. And I told her what had happened, and we joined hands and asked the Lord to rid our home of any unclean and troublemaking spirits. I assumed that whatever it was decided that it would stop bothering us because we no longer had any interaction with it. During this time, my job required me to work shifts, which meant I would be gone for nearly 14 hours a day, several days a week. My wife told me several times that she thought I had come home early because she would often see a man in the open doorway, only to realize to her dismay that it wasn't me. But one afternoon she called me. "Let me ask you a serious question," she said. "Are you really at work?" Well, I assured her that I was, and I asked her what had happened. She told me that she was soaking in the bathtub reading when on the wall behind her head, inside the bedroom, she felt 3 large knocks behind her. She said she called out to me, but there was no answer. And at that moment, my wife had gone from being a skeptic to a believer. I have an ex-wife in Germany. My daughter visits me often in the United States. She's now a young woman and she enjoys reading. And on one particular visit, on her second night with us, she had jet lag and she couldn't sleep, so she stayed up reading past midnight with her clip-on light wand. She told me that the light kept flickering and turning off. Well, this went on for half a minute or so when she looked off to the edge of the room, and in the front of the chest of drawers was a white misty figure. And it moved toward her, and when it got next to her at the head of the bed, it went up the wall and through the ceiling. She said that she wasn't scared at all, she was just amazed. Knowing how I would have personally reacted, I was amazed that she didn't scream. And then in October of 2020, we sold the house, and prior to doing so, we cleaned it out. And while I was at work, my wife was clearing things out of the attic when out of the blue, she noticed something that looked like a roll of wallpaper. She pulled it out, dusted it off, and peeked inside the roll that was tied up with a string, and she discovered inside a half a dozen cartoons of the original owner of the house. In every drawing, it was an older man, sometimes in an Air Force uniform, with either a cigarette or a pipe in his mouth. Was that the source of the smoke that we kept smelling? I don't know. We completed our move to a smaller place, and grandmother's furniture is now in a storage area until further notice. I wonder how the spirit is coping with that. Oh, that's cool. A haunted piece of furniture. Everywhere they moved and brought grandma's furniture, a dressing table, and large chest of drawers, these things would happen in their house, and then when they put it in storage, everything quit. Could there be haunted furniture? I don't know, but this was a really good story. I've had this a really long time. I think I've had this for 3 years, and I'm so glad to be able to pull it up and read it to you guys. All right, this is a story about a demon. My editor is saying this story was so creepy that I had to edit it on the bike at the gym just so I wouldn't be alone. If you want to listen to this before you let your kids listen to it, you might want to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and read it now. But you've been warned, this might be a scary story and there might be some subject matter that kids would not need to hear. All right, so here we go. When I was 21 years old, I decided to move out to Albuquerque to be with my high school sweetheart. Being that we were still young and dumb to some extent, it seemed like a great idea at the time. Oh, what a huge mistake that was. But either way, if I had not moved out there, I would not have had this experience. In 2001, while living in Albuquerque's Northwest Heights neighborhood, I encountered a demonic spirit that was out to ruin me. I should have packed up and moved back home the second I noticed the activity, but in my young mind, this spirit couldn't hurt me. I first realized something strange was happening when things would move right after I put them in their place. Most of the time it would be keys or paperwork or important phone numbers, or sometimes they would be well hidden and not at all where I left them. None of it made any sense. I had a friend who was a staunch Catholic, and she advised me to pray to St. Anthony to recover my lost items. I started doing this, and it worked because I would find every item in short order. But the occurrences started happening more often, and a weird smell was starting to envelop the condo. It was something between sulfur and the stench of a dead animal. And then something started writing things on the carpet. It was a longer type carpet, and it was very thick, so you could brush the carpet in the opposite direction of which it was made, and you could see what you wrote. The words that were being written were obscene and nasty and downright demonic, and I accused our roommate of doing this as a joke because I never actually saw it being written, but both my boyfriend and his roommate vehemently denied it. One day I had just finished vacuuming the living area and left to go start cleaning our bedroom. And as soon as I walked in the room, I heard a big crashing sound like a big window in the living room was being broken and crushed. I ran out to see what had happened, but nothing was awry except that horrid smell of sulfur and death permeating through the room. I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, and I could have sworn I saw someone dressed in black. I checked our roommate's room, but he wasn't home. Then I checked everywhere else. Every door was locked, and no one was home besides me. And then, right in front of my eyes, I watched something write hell into the carpet. It continued writing other horrible words that I'm not comfortable repeating, mainly unspeakable things that were degrading to women. I called my Catholic friend, who suggested getting some holy water and some sage to burn. She also suggested saying the St. Michael's prayer while doing the cleansing and whenever something was happening in the condo. At first, this angered the entity. I would be getting ready for the day, and while I was putting on my makeup, the entity would grab my hair and literally rip some out of my head. I could sit there looking at the bedroom mirror and see the entity lift my hair up and then yank it out violently. Things with my boyfriend were getting worse by the day, too. He was becoming violent and more angry, and he started abusing drugs and alcohol. It seemed that the more that I called on St. Michael and Jesus, the worse things got. The attacks and the subsequent event were getting more frequent and worse in nature, and I finally decided to go home for a little while just to see if the attacks would stop. When I was packing my last items into my car, my boyfriend honked his horn behind me. He wanted to talk to me, so I ran over to his car and got inside to discuss some things with him. And when I was about ready to get into my vehicle, I saw a man get into the back seat of my car. My boyfriend saw him too, and I sat in his car while he went to check it out, but all he found were my belongings, without any sign that someone had been in there besides me. I had some holy water on me, so I went over to my car and I started shaking the water into the vehicle and chanting the St. Michael's prayer while doing so. And every time I would sprinkle the holy water into my car, it would immediately be thrown back into my face. And when it was thrown back at me, it wasn't cool in temperature like it was when I sprinkled it into my car. It was boiling hot, and it burned when it hit my skin. Something told me not to leave that night on the 6-hour drive home. I left my car packed up, got just what I needed out of it, and spent the night with my boyfriend. I thought that I would revisit leaving the next morning in the daylight. I awoke to being strangled by something that I couldn't see, and when I tried to get out of bed, I had to fight to get up. I realized that my holy water was in the living room, and when I ran to get it, I was tripped on the way by what felt like an invisible leg. And I eventually got the holy water, and I knew I had to go to war with this entity. I went back to the bedroom and started chanting the St. Michael's prayer and sprinkling the holy water, and each time I sprinkled it, the water was thrown back into my face, and then my hair started to be yanked out of my head. Thankfully, I had the stubbornness of a 21-year-old girl, and I chanted with even more conviction, refusing to let it deter me. And I would take breaks from the prayer and plead with St. Michael and Jesus to save me from this demonic entity. I sat in the center of the bed, cross-legged and eyes closed, and continued to go between chanting the prayer and saying heartfelt prayers to St. Michael and Jesus. The sound of breaking glass jolted my eyes open, and I saw through the blinds a hazy sunlight coming through. It was not just regular sunlight, but a beautiful array of colors. Then I saw a figure form out of the hazy light. It was St. Michael, and he looked just like he did in all the paintings that I had seen of him. He was gorgeous. He was 7 feet tall with glowing skin, and everything about him flowed with this incandescent light. I've never seen anything this beautiful, not before or after this event. He had a sword, and he looked like he was ready for battle, and he pushed the sword through the demonic entity, and I watched it slump into a mass of goop and just disappear right before my eyes. St. Michael never said anything to me, but when he looked at me, all I could feel was this immense love and devotion. Then he sat down beside me, and I could even feel the mattress being depressed by his weight. And he sat there for just a second or two, and then he literally flew out of the window. It felt like the entire ordeal only lasted a few minutes, but when I looked at the clock, it was 11:11 a.m. This whole ordeal took 4 hours. After that, I felt comfortable enough to get the heck out of there. I never went back to that place again, and I moved on from that boyfriend too. I later looked up the address and found out that a teenage boy had committed suicide there in 1997. The boy was supposedly into devil worship. I thought you and your viewers might like to hear something paranormal for a change. People need to know that whether or not we can see these things with our eyes, they exist. I have many more tales that I will send to you at a later date. One is about a dogman in New Mexico, and the other is about a chupacabra in central Texas near Abilene. My daughter and I love your channel, and I think that you are an ambassador of all things cryptid and paranormal. Her name is Stella, and she just turned 10 this year, and it would mean so much to her for you to wish her a happy birthday. Stella, and to the woman who wrote this email to me, happy birthday, Stella. I don't know when your birthday is. I've had this story a long time, and as you all know, and I keep saying after I read these stories, I'm reaching way back and getting, I've got some pretty good help with editing now, and it's making it easy to send these off, and I get them back real quick. It just makes it easy to read these. So anyway, thanks to the woman who wrote this. What a scary, scary story. And happy birthday to Stella. Stella's 10, heck, she might be 12 by now. But happy birthday, Stella. I'm so glad your mom sent me this story and hope you're having a good school should be starting right about now, and I hope it's all started well for you. So happy birthday, Stella. All right. Thanks for the email. Thanks for listening to this array of different kind of stories on this podcast. I love the variety of stuff that I can reach back and get in some of my older emails. They're all good stories. I kind of mix it up on these latest podcasts, and I'm really loving doing this. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you all on the next podcast. Thank you.